In any discussion of a widespread kinetic conflict or societal collapse in American soil, the vision of the enemy is a foreign invader wearing a military uniform. And this sort of image has been pushed forward by popular media such as 1984 Red Dawn, which depicts Soviet paratroopers with Cuban auxiliaries, or in modern reboots or in modern video games such as Homefront, for example, where you have what is Chinese but hastily slapped on with North Korean flags as the enemy to fight against. Although those reboots and that video game are quite mediocre. And what these enemies would do would be to go door to door, kick in doors, invade people's homes, and round up civilians for their death camps or re-education or compliance with whatever the globe wants. Leave that to your own imagination. And then you have your own response in gun tubing channels, in civilian preparation channels, talking about, such as from Grantham or civilian principles, which often frame that the civilian guerrilla or the Minuteman we fight against these particular uniformed fighters whom have heavy logistics and air support.
Anything close to an actual militaristic infrastructure. You're going to rely heavily on local knowledge and community that you're building and participating in to help sustain you and aid you throughout whatever it is. And to paint an even better picture, think of Red Dawn. And yes, I know Red Dawn, that whole thing has been beaten to death, but it's a great example of what would happen if a foreign force made the really shit choice of invading the United States. Now, Minutemen could be considered a type of guerrilla fighter due to their occasional use of unconventional tactics. Their organized militia structure and specific historical context set them apart from the broader, more flexible, and often stronger concept of guerrilla warfare.
It all comes down to you. And it might seem crazy, it might seem fear-mongering to talk about this type of stuff, to learn this type of information. And yet, throughout time in history, very recent history in fact, people have found themselves in some very tough situations. The craziest thing to me about combat survival is that oftentimes it occurs after evasion. And from watching the evasion video or beginning the evasion video, you know how intense and how brutal evasion can be. It can last for hours, it can last for weeks, it can last for months. But many individuals throughout history have found themselves evading from enemy forces. And once they've evaded from those enemy forces, suddenly they find themselves either so far in civilization in order to lose their invaders, or sometimes they find themselves so far in the wilderness due to trying to lose whoever's pursuing them that suddenly, after weeks, after months of evasion, they have to survive now. But it's not just survival, it's combat survival, because there's still an element of being hunted. They could still run into enemy forces. People have oftentimes evaded to where they thought their front lines.
However, instead of this Red Dawn sort of enemy, a foreign uniformed enemy troop as portrayed by popular media, or the shown enemy as seen on civilian preparedness channels or gun tube channels, it isn't that. Not the foreign uniformed enemy troop. In fact, that would have been an easy pill to swallow. For an enemy, easy to identify, shoot on sight. But no. We instead have a more uncomfortable and inconvenient truth, is that the kinetic adversary is more likely might be your neighbor, might be a former classmate at the university you attended, or even a professor, or could have been someone who just simply worked at a fried chicken fast food restaurant you show up every once in a while. They are ideologically possessed and armed to the teeth, and their ideologies are based on that of racial supremacy, nihilistic accelerationism, and or Marxism. And more are banding together as paramilitaries to create chaos, enable the common criminal threat to terrorize the American public. We call these threats in the lone wolf form as the domestic adversary, or, if they're banded together, as the domestic adversary paramilitary, or DAP. And instead of these hypothetical Red Dawn sorts of enemies, instead the DAP is already here, they're training right now, they have elevated their numbers, equipment, and training standards, and their existence has exploded or amplified since the 2010s. And they're ongoing in trying to refine their procedures, practices, and offensive doctrine, and have already stated that they want you dead. And this rhetoric is crystal clear. Take a look at the DAP's own propaganda. Look at the Atomwaffen Division, an accelerationist neo-Nazi group, where it says, "It's all been at your hand. Don't try to build a new world. Look forward to the end. A new order will rise." Meanwhile, if you look at the far left, we have Doll Squad, an anarcho-trans Marxist death squad, where it says, "Touching grass isn't enough. Fascists have to die." Another one featuring them would say, "No quarter," which is, if you blow it up to a very widespread scale, genocide not unlike Pol Pot's over in Cambodia or Holodomor over in Ukraine. And don't confuse this with, like, having them be only against, say, neo-Nazi groups like the Atomwaffen Division. No, it literally means anyone else to the right of Mao.
I feel like fascism is at an all-time high here in America. When Trump won, there was this emboldenment to be more open with it. But when the Democrats are in power, that same fascism's there. So the Democrats win or the Republicans win, it's all the same to me. America's winning, and I believe America's fascist.
This can be further evidenced and cross-referenced through numerous exclusive Bright reports in the past on the Doll Squad, where they view even other people on the far left, like the SRA, for example, as, colonizers or liberals or something. Either way, these people are deranged and they're dangerous. And we have known examples of these groups, either individuals or a leader of a paramilitary, to do a kinetic event in the United States. There are many examples I can think of, from the 2010s onward to the present day. In 2020, the NFAC, pointing weapons at motorists and blocking the road in Stone Mountain, Georgia. Heavily uniformed, heavily armed. Racial supremacists. We have numerous murders by the Atomwaffen Division, a white supremacist neo-Nazi accelerationist group, and numerous murders have happened in the 2010s. In 2017 at the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, we have armed socialists of the national and Marxist variety causing kinetic events against each other, pointing weapons at each other. In 2019, in Eugene, Oregon, the leader of an anarcho-queer militia, Community Armed Self-Defense, whose their stated goal was, in publicly released FBI reports, where the stated goal is to have the leader, Charles Landros, use his military training to preferably train non-whites to kill the ruling class. And his fate was returned fire from police after he opens fire at them inside of a middle school in Eugene, Oregon. We have a foiled conspiracy against a Virginia Capitol pro-gun rally by the Base, another accelerationist neo-Nazi group, in January 2020. We have in the middle of 2020, Chaz or Chop, over in Seattle, Washington, greatly controlled by criminal elements led by the Puget Sound John Brown Gun Club. We have numerous armed Antifa attacks over in Kenosha, Washington, Austin, Texas, Minneapolis, Minnesota, among other major American cities, often led by anarcho-communist groups, as well as criminal elements supported by them. We have armed queer accelerationism, such as in the 2023 Nashville school shooting, as well as the 2025 Minneapolis Catholic school shooting. We have, in July of 2025, the coordinated Antifa cell attacking the Prairieland ICE facility in June 4th, 2025 by elements known to be members of the Dallas-Fort Worth Socialist Rifle Association and the Elm Fork John Brown Gun Club. We have the numerous firebombings and shootings by an SRA member against a Tesla car dealership in Salem, Oregon. And we also have a drive-by on a Seattle, Washington church, also in 2025, during a church barbecue, killing a father in front of his own family. Additionally, we have politically motivated violence over in Portland, Oregon, for example, such as a man known to be part of Antifa ideology and very likely part of an Antifa armed group, and then fleeing from police only to meet his end in a shootout against the US Marshals. And that's not all of them. That's not an extensive list. Those are things that I have thought of at the top of my head. I could look this up, it's confirmed to be true. And these ideologies, they share one thing in mind. Among either lone wolves or, more disturbingly, coordinated cells and paramilitaries, that their ideologies are most often based in racial supremacy, Marxism, and or nihilistic accelerationism. And the actions by the members and their groups can easily be textbook definitions of terrorism as defined by the FBI historically in the 1980s as well as the present day. The historical definition of terrorism by the FBI in 1982 would be the unlawful use of force or violence against persons or property to intimidate or coerce the government or civilian population in furtherance of political or social objectives. Additionally, the current definition of domestic terrorism by the FBI in 2025 would be that violent criminal acts committed by individuals and or groups to further ideological goals stemming from domestic influences such as those of a political, religious, social, racial, or environmental nature. However, to keep in mind is that the domestic adversary paramilitary is not new. While our focus on domestic adversaries and their paramilitaries are from the mid-2010s onwards, these groups are not a new phenomenon. For example, in the 1970s, Weather Underground was a Marxist-Leninist group responsible for numerous bombings and firebombings on infrastructure, businesses, homes, and including the Pentagon and the US Capitol building. They also committed multiple murders. As stated in their 1969 manifesto, the goal is the destruction of US imperialism and the achievement of a classless world communism. And you can look at this at the manifesto called You Don't Need a Weatherman to Know Which Way the Wind Blows, published in 1969. A former member of the Weather Underground, Larry Grathwohl, in a 1982 interview, No Place to Hide, The Strategy and Tactics of Terrorism, stated that no members of the Weather Underground could put into any consideration on feeding, clothing, or governing the people. It was assumed that after this American collapse, that the communist governments of the world, of China, Cuba, and the Soviet Union will take over different regions of the United States, and in the interim, they would eliminate what they deem as counter-revolutionaries, estimated to be about 25 million people. Keep in mind that the United States population in the early 1970s was approximately 203 million.
I brought up the subject of what's going to happen after we take over the government. We become responsible then for administrating, 250 million people. And there was no answers. No one had given any thought to economics. How are you going to clothe and feed these people? The only thing that I could get was that they expected that the Cubans and the North Vietnamese and the Chinese and the Russians would all want to occupy different portions of the United States. They also believed that their immediate responsibility would be to protect against what they called the counter-revolution. And they felt that this counter-revolution could best be guarded against by creating and establishing re-education centers in the Southwest, where we would take all the people who needed to be re-educated into the new way of thinking and teach them how things were going to be. I ask, well, what is going to happen to those people that we can't re-educate, that are die-hard capitalists? And the reply was that they'd have to be eliminated. And when I pursued this further, they estimated that they would have to eliminate 25 million people in these re-education centers. And when I say eliminate, I mean kill. 25 million people. Now, I want you to imagine sitting in a room with 25 people, most of which have graduate degrees from Columbia and other well-known educational centers, and hear them figuring out the logistics for the elimination of 25 million people. And they were dead serious.
Another example of a far-left paramilitary back in the 1970s is the Symbionese Liberation Army based in Los Angeles, California. Similar to the Weather Underground and their self-proclaimed anti-imperialist and revolutionary aims, their crimes include murder, kidnapping, armed robbery, hostage-taking, and foiled bomb plots. This group collapsed in 1974 after core leadership was killed in a shootout with the Los Angeles Police Department. Now, besides far-left Marxist paramilitaries, the DAP is also in the form of accelerationist neo-Nazi groups as well. In the 1980s, the Order was a group that adopted the ideology and doctrine from William Pierce's Turner Diaries. It was a white supremacist paramilitary group that aimed to overthrow the federal government through a campaign of assassinations, robberies, and bombings to fund and spark a full-scale race war. Many of these groups function and act similarly to the domestic adversary paramilitary of today. Yet often, while the ideologies are the same, Marxism, accelerationism, or racial supremacy, they just now have better technology and communications. So the DAP, nothing new. So to summarize, this video is a primer on the domestic adversary paramilitary and how that they are a more likely and more quick threat to the prepared citizen, the civilian guerrilla, the Minuteman, than that of a foreign enemy troop as portrayed in a Red Dawn sort of situation. The domestic adversary paramilitary already exists within America's borders, and they don't have to speak Russian or Chinese to do so. They are known to have done kinetic events in the past, even as far back as the 1970s, and have existed since the 1970s, or that the core ideologies of that of either Marxism, accelerationism, or racial superiority, but they just change to different factions, different forms, and have better improved technology. Minimums of training, doctrine, and equipment, and refining and becoming better each and passing day. So you should get onto a training and preparation as well, because otherwise you're just another target for them. If you'd like to learn more on the topics I discussed today, go and check out previous videos on the Glow So Bright channel on these various groups I've discussed. Puget Sound John Brown Gun Club, for example, Benjamin Song's Antifa Cell, Doll Squad. Doll Squad is probably one of the textbook examples that I've covered for the domestic adversary paramilitary. Or if you'd like to look at external sources outside of the Glow So Bright channel, go ahead and check out the George Washington University Project on Extremism. All of these will be found on the link down below. And if you'd like to support the channel, and you found it quite informative, go ahead. Give it a like, comment down below what you think, read the video description, and also subscribe and share. Doing so means a lot for the channel, and it's the best way to do so. Another way you can support the channel financially, a very big help to do so. If not, I understand, economy's getting pretty tough out there, is to subscribe to the Subscribe Starter link or donate as a one-time donation to the Ko-fi link down below. Affiliate links down below will also help the channel on what sort of camera equipment I recommend and use. Go ahead, follow me on X, subscribe to me on YouTube, and there are alternative platforms out there such as on Rumble, but I don't really use it that often. If you find it quite informative and you like the video on the domestic adversary paramilitary, brought to you by Glow So Bright, I greatly thank you for your patronage and viewership. Thank you very much. Oh yeah, if you ever encounter any sort of unlawful activity, go ahead and report it to the FBI at tips.fbi.gov.